Hello, this is Neo, just an average CSGO player, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
This is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is techgirl. That's right. This is real. This isn't a surreal dream that's happening. It's actually no. Here's the thing. For this episode, obviously, I know Sam here. We do a show together, and we've interacted a bunch of times over the years publicly, so people know we know each other. But on this Reflections, I'm going to do it a tiny bit differently than how I usually do them, which is sometimes when it's someone that like the whole fan base might not be super familiar with, or maybe they don't know any of the backstory. Sometimes I do try to do all the research that's humanly possible to do online to find every detail out, etc. But in that case, that's usually more people I don't know, so it's more like I need that to know if they're like, you know, they're not addressing something or they're embarrassed about something or they just think it wouldn't be interesting. In your case, I mean, we've gone back and forth obviously on a bunch of shows, and I've even heard, if people don't know, if they check out both the episode that we did on Feed the Trolls with Vilga, the one that was about women's CS, you actually give a little bit interesting backstory there about you and your dad. Then you have a one that's on the Beat Site Baddies show, which is the one that you do with Donna. On the second episode, you actually give basically your like origin story, how you got into CS on that one, so people can actually go and find some of the lore is out there. What I wanted to do was essentially, I assume a lot of people watching this are from the Counter-Strike community, so I wanted us to all just learn together. This will be like one of those interactive children's shows. You'll talk and we'll learn as it goes. So I did do a little bit of research. So first things first is, like I referenced with those two episodes, I actually just wanted you to give people, essentially, even though it's usually whacking interviews when people like, you know, how did you get into gaming? Because there's two ways that goes. It's usually not interesting. It's either like, it's the equivalent of asking the singer, how did you get into singing? And instead of actually saying, you know, when they became like, interested in music and became good, they just say, I was singing with a hairbrush in the shower. And it's like, that sounds like a cutesy story, but it's actually quite a rubbish story if you really want to know if someone's a professional singer, right? So I don't mean, did you play Mario? You know, what was the first console? Or whatever. Obviously, people are more interested, I'd say, on the esports side. Like, how do you get interested in competitive gaming? That is, even to this day, I still think that's something that's fairly niche because, yes, generalized gaming is very normalized, but being like a weirdo who sticks with one game and goes to the, and then the idea, by the way, you work on that side, you're on the sports side, it's even another niche of a niche of a niche, you know, it's a tiny cross section. So essentially, you gave some of the interesting info there if people want to go really deep. But one thing I thought was interesting, I thought I'd ask this as the initial framing is, if we're going to talk, look, spoiler, in this interview, we will address the fact you are a woman, but it won't be on sort of like, oh my God, so you can hold the controller with it. It'll be more like that will be, because that is who you are, that's part of your identity and who you are. So one thing I thought was an interesting angle to start with is, it seems like you are one of the people where, I mean, I think you even described yourself this, you come across as a little bit of a tomboy. You're someone who, I mean, in this case, you told the story that it was your brother that was going to LANs and playing a bunch of games. Were you the sort of kid who you wanted to just get involved whatever he was doing, or if he was doing something cool, you wanted to be a part of it or something?
I don't even think it was my brother. I think that the truth was it was my dad. Just right. Because, yeah, so this is I mean, okay, my dad has actually passed away, but when, obviously growing up, I can now say that I'm pretty sure my dad was either autistic or had Asperger's or whatever it was. I mean, I think he never really got diagnosed, but he really struggled with like human interaction, right? Like he just... My dad, like his growing up, I'll give you an idea, we didn't watch sports at home. Like he did not, no rugby, no football.
That's quite unusual for South Africans, obviously. People are super proud of those sports, yeah.
It's absurd, right? So on my mom's side of the family, like rugby and football and like sport was, it was a sporty household. My dad's favorite thing was building Meccano. And I don't know if anyone like I think quite a few people don't know what Meccano is, but it's basically like the original Lego. It's like it's metal pieces, and then you put the little nuts and bolts in. And he loved Meccano. He loved building Meccano, and his favorite thing to do on the weekend was to take us to Meccano shows. But you have to understand that the type of people who loved Meccano
were mega nerds, of course, yeah.
Not even mega nerds. They were just retired. In South Africa, it was retired old men.
Oh, because it's like, an older generation, right? I see, right, okay.
So my childhood consisted of my father dragging us to these like weird town hall places with a bunch of retired old men chatting about their Meccano collections. And he had this like weird fascination with steam engines. So all he wanted to do was like build a steam engine out of Meccano. So if we went at a Meccano show, we used to go to like these weird farm expos in the middle of nowhere so that he could go look at old steam engines. That was what we did. And that was how we bonded with our dad. If you wanted to like talk to him, you had to show an interest in like what he was interested in, because he had zero ability to like talk about the things you were interested in.
Right.
And he was a gamer over and above his Meccano, liked to play games. So I think that was, and he loved the internet and just like computers and building computers, but his biggest thing was like the internet sort of comes in and he's just fascinated. He was on message boards all the time talking about Meccano.
Yeah.
So like that was our thing. And I've told this story. I don't know if I've told it to you, but I told it to Blair and Richard at a PGL event and they thought it was the funniest thing ever. So I'll reshare it here. Like when I was 13, Hotmail, everyone had a Hotmail address, right? And my dad was like, I just moved to a new school and I didn't really fit in because I was always a little bit of a nerd. And my dad thought it was a good idea to teach me about social engineering and how to hack email accounts.
Oh yeah, you did tell me this.
And he pointed out, so he points out to me that like everyone on Hotmail has this, because at that stage, if you didn't know your password, if you clicked forgot password, you got a prompt question and there was only 4 questions. So it had to be one of those 4 questions. Then you would give the answer and you could change the password. But he was like, what a lot of people do is the answer to that question is their password.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So off I toddled to school the one day.
That's power like that, okay.
The most popular boy in school, and his question was, what is my favorite sport? So we get into chatting and he tells me it's wakeboarding. I go home. Guess how I get
I know you actually are social engineering, getting all of it, okay.
Yeah. I break into his email accounts. I just think I'm so freaking cool now because he's having this like weird email with another guy about a girl he likes. What my dad didn't teach me because he didn't have social skills was that you don't now go to school and tell them that you broke into the email. You know, all their secrets.
Oh, that hurts. That was so cool until that point. It was edgy. You get the idea. You tell them why. Oh.
And there we go. That was high school was ruined for me from that day forward because I was the weird chick that broke into someone's email. But like that was the relationship I had. So games started because of that, because I was just, you had to talk about things he was interested in or he didn't really talk to you. And I do think that's also why my brother started playing. My brother will say that's not the case, but I do think that was why we kind of got into gaming, was because he would let us sit and watch him play Doom. He bought us Mortal Kombat 3. Didn't think that was a problem for his kids to go ripping spines out. Then he taught us how to use message boards to find cheats so we could do like all the cool fatalities. Okay. I just remember running rampant on the internet with my brother. And then like, obviously every girl gets the Sims. I got the Sims and I needed to mod, right? So I got all the members from KISS so I could put them into Sims. I found all the mods, did that so I could show him how cool it was. I think I loaded like 1 million viruses onto his PC at the time, but whatever. Okay. And he was so proud of me because I'd got the members of KISS into the Sims, you know. So that was how I got into gaming, to be honest. I was just looking for my dad's attention. Serious daddy issues there. But then from then on out, like, because those were the things I was always involved in, and it was like, I remember, like, now I'm just babbling, but Star Trek as well. My dad woke me up once at like 1 a.m. on a school morning to watch some Star Trek movie that was on, because it was very important that I watched all of Star Trek. So like, my brother and I grew up knowing way too much about Star Trek, which was just not something you could talk about at school because no one else was watching that stuff. They didn't have any cooking clue what you were on about. So that was basically how we got involved. And I just grew up being a bit of a tomboy and a nerd, and that was my life, really.
See, look, as will emerge as like a sort of hidden, invisible sub-theme of this interview, you're being self-deprecating because, look, I guess in that sense, that's actually how I know which parts of the Commonwealth worked out. Like, you've got that Britishness where you're supposed to sort of, you know, downplay it a bit. I don't know what went wrong with the American experiment. They're all just shameless. They all just say everything's brilliant and they're all the best. So, but you're doing that thing there to socially, like, shield against the fact that, like, here's the thing, I wouldn't describe that as daddy issues. I think it sounds like you had an awesome relationship with your dad. Yeah, it was a strange one. You had to go through this, like, weird prism of games and things he was into, but it was a way you connected with him. Because I actually want to make a bigger point about this, which is this is actually something I was like mildly trying to address on that women's show, but obviously mainly we were tailoring that one largely to Vilga and what she wanted to talk about. This is, but when you mentioned the thing about your dad, I wanted to talk about this actually, because one thing I found as a trend with women that I've associated with in the esports industry and I've like worked with or had like positive interactions with on shows, or I just find it like people who are open and have like a very good, let's say, team mentality to working in the industry. They don't have like a really diva-ish mentality of like, you know, I'm just trying to get mine and fuck everyone else. I've noticed one of the common trends actually is if I ever do, and I'm also kind of a weirdo, I don't just go into, hey, so what's going on with your family? What are you doing? We'll talk about a million game things before we ever get to that. But if I ever do that after years of knowing them, almost every one of them has a backstory like yours. Like I can tell you, when I interviewed Freya, I guessed something similar. Yeah, guess what? Her dad was who she like bonded with. He used to play Call of Duty or something, and the same thing, that was like how they got into that, and then it became a thing. And what I'm trying to get at here is, I think if you're someone someone who had male family members that you associate with and have a positive relationship with, and especially if it comes to gaming, by the way, I notice those women, when they come into the wider gaming space, I find them actually the opposite to what you're saying. I find them to be very well adjusted. They seem like they don't come in with some sort of strange baggage or some weird axe to grind. Whereas here's the thing, I can actually understand, I'll put myself in their position, in the same way as there are a lot of men who play games who you can tell grew up as like an only child or only brothers, or they were a bit of a weirdo who's just in the house all day playing games and they haven't been socialized around women, etc. They tend to be the ones that have ridiculous opinions and have very harsh way of interacting with people. Whereas you can tell the ones that are like, again, just they've got like a sister or something, or their mum had a good relationship with them. I think these things are important. I think you can see that sort of, it does set the sort of blueprint for how you interact with people going forwards. Because I feel like you get along with people very easily in gaming who are men, right?
I think so. I also think that that's because, and this is something I've only realized recently, where I was like, the one thing my dad never did was make me feel different because I was a woman.
Okay.
I actually think that like the question that always used to, that I mean, it still always comes up is like, oh, you know, you're a woman in gaming, like you're underrepresented, it must be so tough. I was like, it's not even just in gaming, in life. I never really quite understood that concept of like, you're a woman, therefore you're treated differently, until probably like when I went out into like high school, not even high school because I was a little bit of a nerd and like away from everyone, maybe like university, where I was like, oh shit, like you actually get treated differently. But he never once was like, because you're a woman, you'll be treated differently, or you need to think of this. I mean, he just treated everyone the same. Like that was just how he was. So I do think that also helped, because I never grew up feeling like I needed to be different, or that there was like a specific gender role that I had to play into, which I suppose also leads into me being a bit more of a tomboy and like a little bit more brash and in your face. But because I was never told like, oh, you know, ladies must sit quietly and be polite and don't speak out. Like that never happened in our house. Like everyone was equal, and you know, if the Hunger Games came, you were all on your own and you would fight for whatever happened, and that was that. Like that was kind of how we were raised, which now that I'm older, I'm like really grateful for, because I actually think it made me a lot tougher, if that makes sense, and a lot, maybe like a little bit more naive to the world. So therefore, I just, when people said, no, you can't do that, I'd be like, shut up, I can do whatever I want. Like my dad told me I could. Like that was kind of how I was raised. And I do think that means that I've always struggled. I'm a bit more sensitive now because I've got older, and I realize that you need to listen to other people's experiences. But when women say like, oh, it's really tough, you know, when you're playing a game and men are telling you to get back in the kitchen, I'm like, well, tell them to F off. Like that's kind of my thing. And it's terrible, because also when like terrible things happen, I'm like, well, why don't you just stand up to that guy and tell him to go shove it, or like speak up? But I think I was raised to just speak up, whereas I've now realized actually a lot of young girls are not raised like that at all. So it does bug them when that sort of stuff happens in game or in real life. They don't know how to address it because they've been taught to keep quiet. So I'm very grateful to him for that. And I do think there's a lot of women that were raised like that, which is why we're all a bit louder and possibly easier to get along with, maybe to a degree. That could also be the case.
No, but I mean, along these lines, like one of the thought I didn't really finish was on the women's side. I can totally understand if a woman grew up without either brothers or a dad, or maybe they just didn't have a great relationship, or maybe it had no connection to things like gaming, so that's not like a shared interest. If they come into the male space of gaming and they only see men as like someone who's trying to like exploit me or potentially fuck me or say something inappropriate, or maybe when they play, like you say, they just get all hostility. I do think, unfortunately, it will make those people, as you can imagine, blanket that experience across the whole space. Whereas I can tell you, one of the reasons, if you notice, particularly people who actually might be from an older generation like me and Richard, one of the reasons we're welcoming is I can tell you, not only are we people who in our lives have had these relationships where we already knew women like that and it wasn't a big deal that they played games, but more importantly, the joke is in the early esports space, there wasn't even a choice. There were almost no women. Like the joke is there was like enough you could count them on two hands, and they're all actually like almost every one of them's in like Hall of Fame now, because that's how rare it was to be a woman who in any context played professionally or was on the talent side in the space. And I can tell you back then, it certainly wasn't the mentality that like everyone was some like weird like incel character who was like, get women out. Like actually it was the other way around. We all wished that cool women wanted to be involved in the space so that we could have like a fun open environment where I even think when you do events, like this is where if someone sat at home and they're thinking too much about the game, you're missing the point. Like when you do an event, it's a creative space that you're basically designing where a bunch of personalities interact. So of course you want different people who have different different fun perspectives, or you can play on a different angle there. So, because what I want to tie this into is, as you say, I also feel like it reminds me similarly when I talked to Gio, who I did my VALORANT show with. She had a similar thing. She had a great relationship with her dad. And then early on, believe it or not, she has a very unique perspective because she actually went to like an all-girls school or something bizarre like that. That made her actually not have like the same perspective on sexism, etc., because she just didn't encounter it in the same way. I think she only interacted with people on like a personal level or something. So I wonder, in your case, like you say there, it seems like actually generally, look, I'm sure there's some horror stories. You've had a fairly sort of like enjoyable entrance into the esports space. It hasn't been too many big challenges or things that were like felt like they were holding you down.
I think so. I think in South Africa I struggled because it's a very small space, and I thought when I started there was a lot of what are you doing here?
Oh, people were hostile, right?
Yeah, there was a bit of hostility,
right.
And then there was the like you have to earn your spot. You haven't earned your spot here. You know, you shouldn't get this, and you need our help. And my problem was I'd be like, yeah, sure. What do you suggest? And then people would say things. I'd be like, cool. And then I just go do whatever I wanted, which I've since found out can rub people up the wrong way, when you kind of just ignore them. But that was a bit rough in the beginning, and then like I just got so much. I remember like specifically in the South African space, I think the players in the beginning weren't hostile. They were quite apprehensive. And then very quickly I found the players were a lot more welcoming. But they said, I had a friend, Shaz, who played competitively. She was a girl who played with all the boys, Shakara. And she said to me years later, she was like, well, the reason we liked you is because you would speak to us. You asked us what we thought, what we were feeling. Like, because my thing was like, well, I'll just ask them. Like, I'll ask the players, what do you think of this matchup? And she said that wasn't common back then. Like, the sort of talent didn't really talk to the players, which if you think about it, it's freaking mind-blowing. How the hell do you learn anything? So the players kind of accepted me early on, but I felt like other talent and like tournament organizers really didn't like me. But I think that had a lot to do with just the fact that they had built this space and they had worked in their minds, they had worked for so many years to build this tiny little piece of the pie. I kind of popped up and they didn't know who I was because I had never gone to speak to them. I was hanging out with my brother and his friends and they were playing, and that was kind of where I was. So for them, I hadn't earned that whole concept of like earning your spot, you know? So there was a bit of hostility. And then I heard, like, this is typical woman bullshit though. I heard all those things of, oh, this one says that you slept with this one. And
high school shit, right?
Yeah,
right.
you gave this one this. But then my way of dealing with that, which again, I've since learned is exactly how you rub people up the wrong way, is I just went to the people who apparently said it and was like, hey, so I heard you said this. What's up with that? I probably didn't say it as nicely as that, actually, in hindsight. It was probably a lot more like shitty. And then there was probably like some tweets being like, well, I heard all these people said this stuff, like, F them. I know you're an idiot.
I love it.
I actually think I don't know if I ever tweeted this, but I know I said it once in a public setting where I was like, if I was giving as much head as all of these dudes were saying, I wouldn't be able to work as much as I am because my mouth would be full all the time.
Okay.
Like something like really crude like that. It was so bad. But I was like young and I was just like, well, I'll just call it out. And I do think it actually helped. Like I think that was also why like a lot of the players were pretty like open to me as well. Because I think my first ever event, I can't even remember. It was like I had to do CS and Dota, and I asked a dumb question because I didn't understand Dota. It was a dumb question. I remember it was dumb. And I asked it, and the player was like really edgy and like came back and basically called me dumb on camera. And then everyone in the chat started calling me cringe girl because the question was cringy. So then I just came back like a little while later, and I can't remember what I said, but I ended it by looking at the camera just being like, well, who's the cringe girl now? Like just leant into it.
Okay.
And then everyone was like, oh, we love that, because I think they liked the fact that I kind of just owned
Yeah, you took it on the chin. Yeah.
So I've always been like that, but I've since learned like that's not like a lot of people aren't like that. So I think when I was younger, I just always was like, well, why don't you just speak up and say something? But I've since learned that that's not the way to handle it. But in terms of like Counter-Strike globally, everyone was really welcoming from the get-go. Probably because I was running around like a small child, just being like, oh my God, do you know who you are? I've watched you on my screen for so many years. And like, it was just I was so excited just to be there. Because I also kept thinking, maybe I only ever work once.
Oh, right.
Like, this is cool. Yeah, this is my only event. So I just treat every event like my only event. And I was just so excited to like meet people I'd watched for such a long time.
Even though, again, this is another topic that is in the bingo card of every interview ever done with you. You are from South Africa. Much like the fact you are a woman, it's somewhat inescapable and intrinsic to who you are and how your job works. So I have to ask the question. So I would ask it this way. I will just say straight up, I know a lot about esports and esports history, and I know close to fuck all, aside from things you've told me and I've seen in your videos about South African esports, because unfortunately, it's fairly irrelevant and incredibly tiny. Like, the joke is literally all I know about South African esports before I talked to you was Quickshot came from there, and spoiler, there's a reason why his career was getting the fuck out of South Africa and then having a whole massive esports career. He would even tell you that himself. And then secondly, the fact that ReDeYe went there way back in the day and they had that Quake 4 LAN there, that Fatality was at. That's about it, the Rage LAN, the one that you even referenced was the LAN you were going to years later. That's all I know about South African esports. So immediately, already, I'm sure it's hard to get into the space as a woman, but the joke is essentially South African esports, I mean, even to this day, is still very small, right? It's not really like a direct on-ramp to being a world famous player. I mean, the joke is, again, if I have to think of someone modern day, I think of the people who had to go to America and join Complexity, the JT and TC and those guys. So in your particular case, I'm guessing back when you started, we're talking like close to 10 years ago or something, it must have been an incredibly small scene. I mean, at that point in time, even if you get to the top of that scene, does it even interact with global esports? What was it like?
It was tiny. So I remember when my brother started playing competitively, that was when I kind of started watching. And then it's like, you had a couple of like LANs in like weird little internet cafes where it's like the stereotypical you can win a mouse pad. But then like everyone played something called DGL, which was this telecommunication, the government, I don't know, I'm misquoted here, but I'm pretty sure the government owns the majority shares in Telkom, which was this telecommunications giant that pushed money into the digital gaming league, DGL. And Rage that you spoke about was this massive expo. This was back in the day where like selling hard copies of games was a thing, right?
Oh, right,
so what would happen is in October, all the game devs would send early access code and like the actual devs through to Rage, and people could come and play these games, and then they could obviously order them and buy them just before Christmas. That was the sell. But underneath Rage, that was the thing. Rage was this expo center, but they had a basement. And in the basement, once a year, we had DGL, which was like the finals of this esports league. No one knew it was in the basement. Everyone at Rage did not care. No one came down. But like, everyone would be down, like everyone into esports would be downstairs watching DGL. It was like dark and dingy. And I actually was at DGL quite a few times, and I just was quiet and I never really spoke up. But my brother was playing there. Shaz, who I mentioned before, she played Counter-Strike. She actually played Battlefield. And I remember once I was just like, I can't remember who I was working for, but I was freelancing for like, I wasn't even getting paid. I think it was like a magazine or whatever, so I could get tickets to Rage. And they like forced me to go interview Shaz, and I still remember that was how we met. I remember the interview because I looked at her, I was like, I think that they're just forcing me to interview because you're a woman and I'm a woman. And she was like, oh yes. And she was like, wait, you're going to do your interview and then he's going to tell you to ask me what it's like to be a woman. And the PR did exactly that, and like we bonded over that. Like this chick was like freaking one of the best players in the country in Battlefield, but that was the conversation they were trying to push. So I'd been hanging out at DGL for a while, but that was like the extent of esports. And then what happened is Telkom, I don't know how this happened and I'm not sure why it happened, but they suddenly announced that they were just going to throw all this money into Counter-Strike and Dota. At the time, it was like 100,000 Rand prize pool, which in South Africa was just the most mental amount of money. And they chose to announce it by flying ReDeYe to South Africa, not for the event, for the launch of the event.
Oh, okay.
And it was insane. They had a party. They literally flew this guy out, which must have cost them a fortune.
Sure.
To a party for media. And I'll never forget, he was in a giant egg. It was this egg that opened up, and there was ReDeYe, and you had all these...
Why did they make it sound like he's Madonna or something? It's ridiculous.
They did it. Duncan, they did it exactly like that. There was like the lights went down, the egg opens, but then the best part of that whole thing was there was maybe 20 players at the front who knew who this man was. But you have to understand, all the mainstream media, all the execs, all the South African celebs who've been invited to this are like,
who the fuck's that? Yeah, of course.
Who's this? Like, no offense, Paul, but like, who's
this? He's famous for his voice, not what he looks like. Yeah, of course.
Who's this random middle-aged dude like in this egg? Sure. And like, it was insane. But obviously, you know, these like media events have free booze. So I just watched like all my brother's mates who played at my house like every weekend, running around getting completely like wasted. And then one of them came to me at one point almost in tears and was just like, this is just the best moment ever. Like, this is going to change everything.
Okay.
Like, because in his mind, we had all been like we were all watching like everything overseas. So
Sure.
in his mind, this was now going to put South Africa on the map. This was going to be his full-time career. And I just remember feeling so freaking sad for him. His name was Ashton. I was just heartbroken for him because I was like, dude, nothing's going to happen. Like, everyone's going to leave this party and maybe someone will write an article, but no one cares, dude. Like, this isn't the change that we want to see. And that was kind of when I was like, nah, fuck it, I'll start covering South African esports. Like, I'll tell, like, if no one else is going to tell these stories, I'll start telling these stories. And that was when I kind of made like the active effort to try and showcase the scene. But honestly, like, there was no scene, if we're dead honest. Like, it was just, they pummeled a bunch of money in, and then a bunch of other brands pummeled a bunch of money in, and then all these weird snake oil salesmen got involved. All the money disappeared. The whole thing collapsed. Lots of people didn't get paid. And now we're back to once a year, Telkom has they've rebranded to VS Gaming, and they do their tournament at the end of the year, and we're right back to where we started, if I'm honest. And that was like South African esports in a nutshell, if that's kind of what's happened to it.
Well, the funny thing is, obviously, another thing that people are going to actually be mistaken about when they come to this interview, if they're coming from Counter-Strike, is they're going to think the story goes that you were in all these other esports, and then, you know, depending on how recently they remember you, 2 years ago or something, suddenly you're in CS. It's like, oh, wow, she's in CS now. And maybe they even think you're some Shocks character. You know, it's coming from another game because you like CS. But if people don't know, CS is actually basically where you started, right, in esports work. In fact, that exact tournament you're talking about, DGL, was a tournament you were working at, and you were doing the early like South African land. So essentially, you were someone. You always try to tell people and stress that you're not actually like a tourist coming into CS now. You've always liked CS, and you were trying to work in CS at the time. It's just obviously there was limited opportunities, right?
Yeah, that was my game, right? That was the one that I wanted to do. It was the game that I did. I did a little bit of Dota just because Telkom did Dota and CS, so they maybe do Dota, but I made it very clear I had no clue what I was doing. And then I did more and more Counter-Strike and kind of focused in on that. And then when this started looking like it didn't even look like a career. I mean, Paul, this is out on the internet, everyone knows, like ReDeYe came to South Africa, we all worked an event. At the end of the event, I am 100% aware I was not on the top of his totem pole of talent. I think he spoke to 2 other people and was like, we can do good things. And then he mentioned to me, he was like, oh, you're really passionate, but you have a lot to work on. And I was just like, cool story, bro. And he's like, I can help you if you want. And I just was like, whatever, like, I'm just having a good time. And then I was in a day job where I just hated my boss. So the one day I sent him a message and I was like, are you serious about what you said? And it had turned out, I think that the people that he'd kind of put above me hadn't really followed up. So I think he was just surprised. And he said, yeah, I'm serious. And I was like, okay, well, what do I need to do? And I was filming myself and I would send him like videos of me doing different hosting and interviewing, and he'd actually like feedback. And he was quite harsh with a lot of his feedback, but I'm super grateful he was, actually, because I think it helped. There was like things I didn't know about like on camera that he helped me tweak. And then at the same time, I think he had set up an agency with some friends. So he said, oh, well, my agency can get you work. I didn't know sweet stuff all about agencies or work overseas or whatever. All I knew is I had a British passport, so I didn't need a visa.
That's key.
And he had said to me, yeah, he was like, it's pretty easy. And also I think there's a misconception that flights to and from South Africa are mad expensive. They actually are the same as flying American talent to Europe for the most part. Like, sometimes they're pricey, but it depends where you're going. But for the most part, it's like on a par. And he knew that because he'd obviously flown here so many times. So he was like, I can get you work. And I didn't believe him. I just went, yeah, cool, do whatever. And he got me a job at Gamescom doing it was like a credit card. I can't even remember. But all I remember was I got to stand on a stage with Body and Apex when they were still in G2. And they were going to choose people from the audience to come and play CS with them. And then they'd play this match. And I was so excited because all I knew was I got to go to this job and meet Apex and Body. And ESL was going to pay me for it. Like, wow. So I arrived. I had no cooking clue what I was doing. I did not know that you had makeup. I'd never been on a stage like that. I just kind of faked it and pretended I knew what was going on, sat in the corner very quiet, and then told the stage manager that I was absolutely terrified and didn't know what to do. And he kind of helped me out, which was like a big saving grace. And I just got to do that gig. And then that was the first and last time I did Counter-Strike, because after that, they kept coming to me with like, I did Crossfire, and then I was doing like all this
CSL,
random
you mean,
stuff.
right? Or do you just mean Code Red?
Code Red, the agency,
Right.
they came to me, they got me, and then they kept saying to me, you need to do this because you need to get some reps under your belt. So I was like, okay. And then they came to me with Overwatch Contenders, and they said, you need to do this like a show reel, and you can get this Overwatch Contenders job. And I said, I was actually doing a South African Counter-Strike league at the time, and I said, but I really want to do Counter-Strike. I don't have proof of this, but at the same time that this was happening, Frankie was moving. She was also signed to Code Red, and she was in the process of
same
moving
time frame, yeah.
Same time frame as Frankie.
She was coming from
moving
PUBG or something, right? Yeah.
To CS was about the time that they said to me for this Overwatch thing. I actually think that Frankie was meant to do this Overwatch Contenders.
Right.
They'd asked for her.
Right.
But I don't know, like that's in history. And I said, but I really want to do CS, and they were like, there isn't really space for you in CS right now. Like all of those roles are taken up. You have no experience. The TOs aren't going to touch you. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it was, but I think it might have had to do with the fact that Frankie was about to break into CS.
Right.
And one agency can't have two women trying to get the same roles, right? So I did.
Or at least it's going to be impossible to equally service both. You're going to end up favouring one or the other, right?
100%. And obviously there was like this backlog of people wanting Frankie for other jobs, and she was going to be busy. So like it's perfect. Sam fills those roles.
Absolutely.
Frankie continues. Whether or not that is how it happened, who knows? But kind of the vibe I got towards the end. But I did this Overwatch show reel, and I did the entire show reel talking about Counter-Strike. So I literally referred to like CTs and Cs, and then instead of players, I just named the heroes of Overwatch because I didn't even really know how Overwatch worked. That was my freaking show reel. Was me doing like a Counter-Strike desk, and then I got hired for that. So there you go. But that was kind of how I ended up in other games, because after Overwatch, then PUBG had a space because Frankie wasn't there anymore, and then there was like, I think I did e-golf at one point, and I did it for so long because everyone kept saying, well, if you want to get into Counter-Strike, you got to get reps under your belt. You got to get reps under your belt. And now in hindsight, I'm like, that was the biggest load of bullshit ever, because no one in Counter-Strike knew I existed because I was so busy doing all that other stuff. That like no one hiring for CS was watching the other games. And that was kind of how I ended up in all the other stuff. So when people say, "Oh, you're new to CS," I'm like, "Nah, I was there. I never really knew how to break in, I suppose, for want of a better term."
To rewind a bit to the ReDeYe part, what you're saying there, by the way, is actually, if you've talked to enough people, a very common experience, which is that ReDeYe himself, you know what, I don't want to speculate here, but he might be a little bit like your dad and me on some sense, if you get what I mean, because ReDeYe's actual way, that's sort of like just his personality. If people don't know, he's met a lot of people who later even went on to be friends and colleagues of his, where he's done the same thing. He'll sort of be like the master of the backhanded compliment. You're like, "Oh, good job." You know, you can probably work on a few things with you. Like, thank you. I didn't really ask for that. But so what's funny is that's something that even rubbed me wrong the first time I met ReDeYe. I know the same thing with Anders. I think he said some comment to him, or Monty or something. He always had something where it's like he essentially wants to give you some advice or something. But here's the difference, though. I think people misread that, Sam, because I think people initially take it as it's just a put down. You're trying to put yourself above me. But here's the thing, as you said there, he actually, as far as I know, he is actually earnest. If you actually then were to message him and say, like, well, all right, what's your advice then? It's not like he was making it up, but he doesn't have anything. He was just saying to fuck with you. He'll give you like real advice. And by the way, he actually does want people to improve. Yes, like you say, it's almost like a tough love approach. He's just a bit like that in terms of how he's a little bit bristly when you first meet him. And also, by the way, on some level, what I can also respect is, as you say, the advice won't just be some super, like, you know, just exactly what he wants it. He's actually got quite a good eye as well for like what makes a good show, and he does care about things like the fact that people aren't slacking on the show, that people are doing things to a high standard. Like, what would you say on this aspect? Because I do think I think that's an area where maybe, especially because of some of the later things in his career, maybe he's a bit misunderstood in that sense. People just only see him as like a diva, or they think he's just being like, put it this way, this isn't the usual approach in the industry. Actually, people are quite scared to turn people off in that sense. In fact, the joke is like, despite my persona, I'm not the person who ever sends anyone unsolicited advice. Like, my style's more like you praise the thing you like, and then if they ask for advice, maybe you give something. But I would never just send it out willy-nilly. So what would you say to this aspect? Because I think actually, again, he's someone there was a very famous person in esports once upon a time, but obviously hasn't been on people's screens for many years, so maybe they don't know the person off camera. What would you say about ReDeYe in that sense?
So, I mean, I obviously live in South Africa, so my only interaction with him was when he was in South Africa. I don't know what happened outside of that. I don't know about his personal life. I don't know about anyone's personal life. I don't really don't dig into colleagues' personal lives. Don't really care. Sorry, people I work with, but like whatever you do outside of work, so long as it doesn't impact the job, I'm not too phased. But so I didn't really know all of the other stuff, right? That obviously came out afterwards. For me, my interaction with him was when he came to work that job, and he does rub people up the wrong way. And I still remember back then, he was actually really polite to everyone. He wasn't super rude, but he didn't hold back. So like he would say he knew what he was coming into, that no one there had ever done this before.
Right.
So he was pretty, I don't want to say, he was brash. Like he would just be like, don't do that, do this. Don't hold the microphone on that hand, hold it in the other hand. But the way he delivers is, I suppose, is maybe it's his tone, or maybe it's just the fact that he's very direct. I think people don't handle that very well.
Right.
And I know now as well, like I've got older, I realize like I'm quite direct sometimes. I'll just be like, I have a tendency, like I've done this to a producer so many times where they'll be like, I think you should do this. And I just go, no. It's the first thing I think. I just go, no. And then I'll discuss and explain why not. But I've realized you can't just go, no. Like that the moment you say that, everyone's heckles rise, right? And they're kind of like, oh, why are you being disagreeable? So I think that he kind of rubbed people up maybe the wrong way doing that. For me, he was super nice while we worked together. I think he was good at reading me because he knew I was absolutely terrified. For starters, I'd never done it before, no clue what I was doing on stage. 2, they made me wear a dress and heels. I hate high heels. I'm super uncomfortable. I could barely walk. So like that immediately makes you he could read all of that very quickly.
Right.
And kind of, he was very sweet while we were working together. And then afterwards, when I said, I mean, like I said, he was like, oh, you're passionate. Like there's lots you have to work on. And it was, I suppose, maybe I could have taken it as, oh, he's putting me down. I didn't say it like that because I knew there was lots I had to work on. But I did watch other people I was working with get really pissed off because they went to him that same event. A lot of the commentators went and asked for feedback, and he gave them feedback, and they were so mad because they didn't want feedback. They wanted to be able to say that ReDeYe said they were really good.
A lot of people, when they say I want feedback, just mean like you say, just tell me like, you're pretty much there. You know, it's like you got it all pretty much. Yeah, they just want the validation, right?
They want that. And that was whatever. And so after that event, they were all like, oh, ReDeYe is,
And he actually really told them what was wrong. I love it.
He just told them what to fix. Like he was dead honest with them. And like in hindsight, where are you now? You're still not commentating because you didn't listen to it.
True.
Like, I don't think everything he said was right, but like a lot of the experience he had is just experience no one else has. But I do think 90% of people who ask for advice don't want it. They just want you to tell them they're great. I know I've had this, I actually think it was with Maui, where like recently we were sitting alone and Maui's like, can I just give you some feedback? And he told me something. And I was like, dude, I've been asking you for months for feedback. And he was like, yeah, I just don't give feedback because people don't really want feedback.
It hurts their feelings, unfortunately, you know.
Yeah, he's like, now we've worked together for a bit so I can feed this back. And it was actually really useful. But I do think that is most people, everyone just is nice because no one wants to hurt anyone's feelings. He was pretty like rough. I mean, the online stuff, I remember he would just send me like an essay of things down to, I still do this. I look everywhere except where I'm supposed to look. It's just like a weird tick that I have. And he was like, you have to look at the camera. Like you can't just keep looking everywhere. And I was like, okay, like I didn't even know I did that. But then when I watched, I realized that was something I did. And that's always stuck with me. And then there's like some advice he gave me, which I don't really listen to anymore. Like his whole thing was always as a desk host, you know, you must be non-biased, you play the middle person, you move the show, you like desk host doesn't have an opinion. I disagree with that now. I don't think that's the way I want to play it.
No, sure.
But at the start, that was really important, you know, like he was like, he's not the only one that said this. I think Kylaris from StarCraft has said this to me as well, which is a good desk host, a good desk segment is when the desk host speaks the least. Like that means you've actually done a really good segment and you should test yourself as to how little you're speaking. So things like that were things that he had also communicated. I just think, obviously there's a lot of other stuff that happened, but I do think that sometimes the way he presented his feedback was possibly somewhat aggressive and diva-like, maybe. I don't know. I worked with him years later overseas, and I did see some of the stuff that people had spoken about, I'll be honest, which I've spoken to him about. But at the same time, I also don't know if you've just had a really shit day. Like, so I'm not, like I said, if it doesn't affect me at work and it doesn't affect everyone else and it's not affecting the broadcast, I kind of just stay out of it because I don't really want to deal with anyone's drama, if I'm honest.
No, by the way, we will definitely, as a topic, discuss later the whole Descos thing, because that is one area where me and him would part ways. I mean, well, I'm not actually a Descos, even though I do a lot of hosting. So I obviously have the analyst perspective, don't I? So maybe I just have a different perspective. He's more old school sort of programming. He's thinking from a producer's point of view, I think, when he thinks of that and what they like to control and what they know is coming up, etc. Which, spoiler, if you know how I work on events, I don't give a flying fuck what the producer says. Keep up with me, mate. We just do whatever we want. And then you have to get to a certain level where you can get away with that. So I understand that not everyone can do that. But anyway, to tie back in, one of the points that we're talking about here, though, that I think is very valuable if someone is broadcast talent, which will be another cross-section of people watching this episode, which is when you say that about advice, what you actually described there about the way some people were basically like hurt when he gave them real advice of like, work on this thing, or like, you know, sort of like straighten up, look presentable. I can tell you, I'll give you a personal example. I actually had that happen to me. I've never told this story before, with Ralph Wright, one of the original OGs of all of esports, who founded like ESL and SK Gaming, and this is, by the way, a long, long time ago. This is in like 2001, so it's like the really early days of like him doing essentially what became ESL later at the time. It was called like CPL Europe or whatever. And when basically I went to one of these events with at the time, my mentor was like a legendary Swedish journalist guy. But at the time, no one went to events. Everything at the time was on the internet. It was like, everything was like a text interview, or you did it over email or MSN Messenger or something. You had all the time in the world, to backspace and to rewrite the question. And then afterwards you could edit it all. So what I wasn't used to at all was doing the live environment and doing like a live interview with someone. And so I'll give you an example. When I did an interview, when we went to the event, so my boss arranged like, hey, like Ralph, like do an interview with him, like we'll introduce like the concept of what you're doing at the event here. I did the interview basically, and I just stood there. At the time, I wasn't the same person I am now. I hadn't built up my whole persona or what my identity was. I didn't know who I was at the time. I was a young guy, believe it or not. And when I went there, I just basically took the mic. I held it like, so not as usual, not even at head height, because that's a trick you actually have to learn. I just held it down here somewhere, and I just tilted the mic to him, and I think I just started the interview by saying something like, why did the event take place? And then Ralph Reichart just stopped and went like, stop, pause. This isn't right. Like, what you have to do is hold the mic like this. You're going to look at me initially. You're going to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, representing this publication, and I'm here with, and then you're going to say Ralph Reichart from, Turtle Entertainment or whatever it was called back then. And then you're going to, after introducing it like that, then you're going to lead into a question. And at the time, here's what's funny. Even though, by the way, that is all incredible, straight-fire advice, which actually, if you think about it, my interview would be shit if he didn't say all that. If he actually just let me do it in like some slapdash way where I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. The joke is I might have gotten back to the hotel later and we'd try to edit that video on like a really old-fashioned camcorder, and maybe my boss goes like, we can't even use this, like what is this, like you don't even introduce him, who is he, like what's going on? But instead, here's the problem though, when he initially told me that, because in a way he's like pausing the interview that I think I'm controlling in that moment, he's basically telling me like, you're shit at this, you know what you're doing, which he's right, by the way. But at the time, this is the problem with ego, that hurts your feelings. You sort of like, what the fuck, like, why are you doing that, why are you being a dick, basically, like I'm trying to do, hey, I'm still learning, all that. But the problem is, what I learned years later is, all that stuff's actually just an issue I have with myself and how I conceive of myself in the job and things I don't know and who can teach me, and, should anyone be allowed to tell me what to do, and maybe I have issues with authority in this. And when I realised about some of that stuff, it's like, actually that person's advice was mega, but you have to be receptive to it. If you're not receptive, it'll just come across as an attack, or it might even make you like resent the person or dislike them or something. So I hope if someone's watching, actually, they realise, like, as long as you have like the stones for it, basically, there's actual value in feedback like that. I think sometimes people tell you something where essentially, like, as you say, maybe everyone else thought that too, but they were dancing around it all the time, right? It's kind of nice sometimes to actually get if you're in the right mind to take it in, it's actually good to get that feedback, I think.
For sure. And like your story, I mean, he didn't have to give you feedback. Like you said, you could have gone back to the hotel and then you would have had a piece of content you couldn't even use. By telling you that, yeah, maybe in a way he was saying you're pretty bad at this, but he's also giving you the advice to make sure what you get is something usable. So I listen to everyone. Sometimes I don't agree, but I won't, while I'm standing there, be like, I don't agree with you. Like, I'll listen to it. And then I always try and like go back and when I say listen to everyone, like obviously not Reddit or whatever else. Like I'm talking about people that are actually in the industry and understand how this whole workload exists and what you need to do. But like there are sometimes I'll listen to an analyst give me feedback and just they'll say that there was something that I was doing that maybe like they didn't really agree with. And while they're giving it to me in my brain, I'm like, nah, dude, you're wrong. But then when I actually go and sit down and like think about it, I'm like, no, I see what they're saying. Like, how can I adjust? And also sometimes it's things you don't even realize you were doing, where you kind of start watching back and realize, oh shit, I'm actually falling into this habit. So I think it's important just to listen to feedback. And again, you don't have to do anything about it. It's just worthwhile to hear what people have to say, because somewhere along the lines you'll learn, and you can tweak what you do to be better. But it doesn't mean that you have to change every time someone says something. But I do think that most people just immediately go to that defensive thing, like you said, where they're like, oh my gosh, this person is saying I'm crap at my job and I'm terrible. No, if someone's actually giving you feedback, they actually do want you to succeed. Because if they don't care and they think you're terrible, they just go, good job, and walk off.
Especially, by the way, if they're in the industry. Because here's the key thing. Put it this way. I won't say who. And luckily, I'll keep it vague so they can't even guess. I'll give you an example. I can tell you among top casters in Counter-Strike, because they all have to act super friendly, because we are all friends with each other, but we're also competing in the same gig. I can tell you I've seen examples of some top casters say to other top casters, look, if you ever do think we're doing anything fucked up, just tell us. Like, we'd be open to that feedback. And then the same casters, when the other ones left the room, were like, why the fuck would we do that? They're our rivals. Like, no, I know what you mean. Like, there's plenty of people who wouldn't give you that advice. They just go, nah, you're fine, go ahead. Like, knowing that they're sort of like leading you off a fucking cliff at that point. No. Like, one thing I wanted to pivot to here, because it's another key part of setting up the story, and then we'll get into a lot of the meat and veg, is obviously another component is why techgirl? Now, there's two angles to this. One, it is just a good angle, by the way. It is like the idea that you brand yourself as like, I'm a girl who's interested in tech, right? By the way, that is like a marketing agency's wet dream. Like, wait a minute. So she's already making it overt. She's a girl. She's into sort of gaming. She specifically likes tech. I think we can get a lot of brand partnerships set up here. Like, that's just like, that's like you coming off the conveyor belt, the dream for all the companies there. They want that demographic to be nailed. So, and also you're even from a small place where they're going to need someone who's like a linchpin figure. They can build base all the stuff around, right? In your case, obviously you do like a blog, etc., and you've said you built this like thing. When you did this initially, did you have an intentional aspect like that of like, oh, if I market myself this way, it might attract this attention? Was that really just at the time the way you presented your identity in general in the gaming space? Why techgirl, or why the techgirl blog? Because the joke is you haven't even done the thing now where you just sound right or whatever. You are still techgirl. You're still doing it now all these years later.
It's driving me mad because I can't get rid of it and I'm just stuck. I'll tell you. So what actually happened was, I decided I was doing like a shitty job that I didn't enjoy, and I had a bunch of mates who were also like in the media space, and we were all writing, and we were just honestly just sick and tired of like making other people money, if I'm being honest. Like, so South Africa's really behind with stuff. So there were like all these like tech sites. There was a bunch of us writing for different tech sites, like freelancing, and we were just bored. Like, we thought that the reviews were boring. By the time we got access to any like new tech, like new phones or whatever, they'd already launched overseas. There was already reviews out, so we were just bored. And I actually started writing for all these, like freelancing for all these sites, because I started after university. I went and worked in a newsroom, funny enough, at a radio station, very, very well-known youth radio station in South Africa. And I was in their newsroom, and I started as a sub-editor. And because I'll be honest, my biggest dream when I finished university was not to get into esports. I wanted to be a Sky News reporter, but like on the front lines in war.
Oh, right, an actual correspondent, right.
So like legitimately my dream was to go to war. That's what I thought I was meant to do. And so then I went to go work in this newsroom. And now I'm going off on a tangent, but they sent me they had a massive, South Africa has a lot of like strikes, and like sometimes things get a bit violent. And so my editor sent me to a strike because of service delivery, and I drove into the strike, and some guys shook my car, and I was like, right, I don't want to be a news reporter.
As in they were trying to tip it over, doing that thing where they go side to side.
Yeah, they're trying to tip it over and shake it. And that was enough. I went, okay, so 1, I'm terrified. 2, I hate this. 3, I'm clearly never going to war because this is like nothing. And I'm scared shitless. That was when I realized that wasn't my thing.
But I mean, in a sense, you do war correspondence. It's just digital fake war. You just ask people, how's the first half? Yeah, you're still doing it. It's just a safer version.
So what ended up happening was, like, because I was working in this newsroom, one of the things that my editor at the time, who was such a dickbag when I worked for him, and now when I look back, I felt like he did such a good job of like teaching us all how to just deal with everything, was he picked up that I was really good at taking like complex text stories about technology and like just simplifying them. But that was just because my father spent all his time like building Meccano and taking us to steam engine shows. So that was what started that. And then I realized there was no money in media. So I sort of moved into like a marketing agency, but I still missed writing because I liked writing and creating, and video was starting to come into being. And so I was freelancing for all these different like tech sites, and I was just bored. And I'll never forget, we were at like a hotel bar, myself and another woman who was like freelancing as a writer, and then a friend of ours who works in PR. And I was like, you know what we should do? We should just start like a blog for women talking about like all the stuff we love. Like, let's talk about tech the way we want to talk about it. Let's talk about like cool accessories because no one talks about that. Like, let's make it super girly. And we all agreed, and then no one did anything. And I hate that. So then I was just like, I'm just gonna start this. Like, I'll just do this thing and I'll write these reviews. And then it needed a name. And that was not my name that I gamed with.
Oh,
that was not any of that. For me, I needed a name.
What was your old alias? Can you tell us what was your old alias?
It's not my old alias. I still play with it, so I don't want anyone.
Okay.
No one waits. I'll tell you, because no one can. No one's going to be able to spell it because I spell it like an idiot. It's no, but like with lots of. I just know. That was literally how I played my whole life.
Like umlaut or something. Okay, fair enough.
Really dumb. It was just no, because that was the first word I ever said. Apparently, my mom said it was no, so I just stuck with no. But I wasn't playing. I mean, imagine if that was Sam No Wright, and that was how I was on a desk, but. I didn't, techgirl was just, I was like, I need a name for the blog that summarizes exactly what it's about and what's available. That one was available, so I took it. And then I took all the social media for it. So my social media was actually my name before that. And then I just took all the techgirl social media, started the blog, and then we had like gaming stuff on there and tech. But then eventually I just shut all my social media down because it just made sense to all have it in one handle. And then obviously when I started covering esports on said blog, and they were like, oh, when you come and do this esports thing, like, what do you want to be called? And I was like, I don't want people to know my gaming name because I don't, at that stage, there was that thing of like, I don't want people to like find me online and do that whole thing that they do. So I don't want them to know that. Like, so I don't want that name. Can I just be Sam? And they were like, no, you have to, because at that stage, you have to have this alias. So I was like, well, fuck it. My social's techgirl, just make it techgirl. I'm easier to find. And then it's stuck, and I can't get rid of it, and it's too late. And now it's here.
It's too late.
And I hate it. Like, I hate it whenever we go to a job and people are like, techgirl. I'm like, stop calling me that. Just call me Sam. But like, I understand why it happens.
No,
also,
sure.
like, I'm not really a girl anymore, am I? Like, so it's just. But now it's here and it's stuck. So it's such a bore. It's not as nearly as smart. Like what you were talking about there from like a marketing point of view. I was like, I wish it was that smart. It was literally like, okay, this is a blog about tech for women, and that's the only domain that's available. And that was it.
No, I can tell you, I had the same thing. Basically, I just actually used to just put random names because I was a nobody. I was just playing on Quake servers back in the day. So you put whatever your name is, just cool things you've heard of. So the joke is really, I just forgot one day, and then eventually people in the server start referring to you by that. So you just don't change it. But then the problem, as you're talking about, becomes people years later imagine you sat down like, this is what will represent me in the world. And so I have all people make these like weird assumptions about like the Hobbit and Tolkien and say it wasn't any of that, mate. Like I wasn't even a massive Tolkien fan or anything. Like it's one of those ones where they make all weird assumptions that aren't even accurate. By the way, one thing I wanted to get into actually is since by doing this blog aspect, another part of your career has been, and that's what I want to ask about, is the idea of things like getting to review tech things, doing small partnerships, potentially going and doing live activations, going and using your hosting skills to be at an expo or something like that. I want to actually ask about that a little bit because that is another thing, which is this is why it's so fraught trying to get into specifically the esports industry to be like on-camera talent. Because as you say, it might all be well and good going, look, I really just love CS and I want to be a CS talent. It's like, yeah, but you haven't got any reps. You've got no background story. Someone can't even look and see that you got those skills. So it's an obvious sort of initial ploy that you should just get the on-camera reps and get the skills down and even go and do expos where you'll start to interact with people who are from game studios. Maybe like an ESL will even be at there. Maybe they'll be hosting like a World of Tanks thing or their own sponsorship activation if it's a Gamescom. And, you make the industry connections, you network. I think people can see the way this goes. But I have to say, from knowing people who've done your gig, a lot of the hosting and the interviewer and desk host jobs, they say that the problem becomes that is its own entire like full-time industry is going to expos, going to games conventions, even things as simple as it depends what you putting your task as, but you can obviously even get roped into some of that could even lead into being the booth babe or something. It depends which gig you want to get at the point. So if people want a full-time job, they'd say you can just get drawn into that whole aspect and that just becomes its own thing that you do in all the time. And I can tell that's actually one of the areas where people who work in esports, they will sparingly do those events. But I know, for example, I'm not speaking at school, it's not something secretly she told me, I just know this. People like Shocks, if an esports fan doesn't know, I'll tell you the reason I know someone like Shocks loves esports, and specifically the game she works in, League of Legends and Counter-Strike, because I can tell you, if tomorrow she only wanted to make pure money and have none of the harassment and all the people being annoying, she could go and do every big Gamescom, CBA, E3, all of them. She would get hired, by the way, as the really, really expensive person who comes out and introduces the celebrity, like fucking Ronaldo or something, to do some bullshit new character in a video game. And I can tell you right now, guys, she would get paid way more than her esports day rate. She would have some like absurd, like 5-figure a day rate. But the problem is, maybe that's not what she wants to do in life. But I've heard essentially, either when you're on the way up, you can just get caught in that kind of ecosystem. It's hard to get out into esports, or it can be itself because you're getting work, and there's always going to be, like I said, many roles they want women for this, and it can just become sort of a temptation in a way that'll lead you away. You've done a lot of these events. What's your relationship with the events in that sense? Like, did you do lots early on? Was there a time where you've ever found something similar? Like, I need to like try and explicitly brand as like I'm just going to be an esport. What would you say to this topic?
So for me, obviously, when I started with the blog, it was like a lot of content around like gadgets and tech and whatever. So that was the first thing, is like people pay you to make that content. So I did that. And I think I could have actually fallen into that trap where that's all I did. Even now, like South Africa is really small, right? That is, I mean, it's a big country, but it's small in terms of like the gaming scene. So there's very little content creators here. There's hardly any streamers. So when I started out, they were like, oh, well, here's a woman talking about games. And yes, she's talking about esports, but it's still games. We can use her here. Like, have this keyboard, have this mouse, do this review, do this. And I do still do some of it because it's easy money, for want of a better term.
Sure.
Like, it's like, when there's a player break, it's an easy way to make a bit of extra cash and keep those partnerships going. But I think I could have fallen into the trap early on where that was all I did. And then I've done a lot of like, I suppose it's a corporate work here where you like host events and stuff. The problem was, and I did a lot, Code Red got me a lot of those gigs as well overseas where I was doing it. My problem is I don't do well with like boring. So like I find that work, it drives me insane. And I'm also not really good when someone's like, this is what we're going to do. And I see the show and I'm like, that's horrible. Like it's so formulaic. Nothing really, I mean, it's not, if Shocks went and did it, she would be on all the big stages. I'm at the small booth on a small stage doing and then there's someone there who's telling me about this idea that they have and it's just bad. And I don't know how to keep my mouth shut. So I struggled with that because I was like, one, I just find these really bad. And also two, I don't fit the box. I think, no disrespect to any women who do this because they've found their niche and that's great. But there is a box that they have for the woman who does that, right? There's a way she dresses, there's a way she carries herself, and there's a way she talks to camera. And it's super polished and it's super clean and she's fantastic at her job. But I was not that person. Like I don't know how to read off a teleprompter and make it look natural. I don't know how to do the corporate dress and do that whole thing. So it just was something that while I was doing it, I don't think I ever really extended past like the lower level. And two, I just hated it. I just thought it was so boring. It was kind of also like towards when I went, I have to get into CS or I'm going to stop esports. Was very similar where I was just sitting there being like, I'm so bored. No disrespect to the games I worked in. The players are great and the people that I got to work with are great. But for me, I was like, it doesn't feel like there's any skin in the game. And also no one does this like CS. Like I wanted to do Counter-Strike because one, I obviously love the game, but also two, like the broadcast's fun, man. Everyone just like, it just looked like everyone was having a good time. And it's that whole thing of like, for me, it needs to be like a little bit edgy and a little bit silly. And for me, it was the only game that lent into what like gaming actually is and what it feels like. Like the way you talk on a CS desk, maybe not so much. They're trying to change this, but back in the day, like the way everyone spoke on a desk was the way you will speak with your mates in TeamSpeak. Like that was what for me esports was supposed to be. I was doing Blizzard, Overwatch, like oh my gosh, the most corporate machine ever, and I couldn't understand one why we had to do it like that, but also two, I couldn't really get any further because I was just bad at doing it like that because it just felt so unnatural. So I think it's easy to fall into that trap, but I do think people that are like genuinely in love with the games that they work in can't fall into that trap, because it does.
Right.
To me, it's mind-numbingly boring. It pays a hell of a lot better than anything else, but I want to have fun. Like, what's the point otherwise?
By the way, you said earlier also about how people who are the producers have like a vision in mind of like how the person who does your sort of job, either stage roles or desk roles, should behave and present themselves, and essentially almost what they're like you said, what box to put them in, how do they want them to neatly be labelled. And one thing I have to say that you've obviously gone against is the standard thinking for those roles should be a pretty girl in a nice dress, looking very professional. And by the way, this is even, if you want to see the best example of this, just go look at any Asian event. They will always have exactly this. They'll have like some corporate sponsor guy who's a CEO, and he's always brought up to the stage like by some woman in a cocktail dress, basically. And then she's sort of like, oh, I'm presenting this person, very demure, very deferential, right? You've obviously gone not only with your personality, but even with your fashion style, very much against that. Like, you're not the person who gets forced into doing this thing if you don't want to do. What is your sense in that? Because I'll put it this way, the obvious angle I would say goes like this. I've known people, I actually knew someone in League of Legends like this, Thorin, if people don't know, back in the day, so it was someone who was openly gay, and they were someone who was trying to also, by the way, be the expert role of like the analyst on a desk. They weren't even trying to be the host, but even she was being pressured, I can tell you, in the early days all the time to like, they were doing all the euphemism, like, hey, why don't you try to make yourself look a bit nicer, or, sell yourself in somewhere. And they were telling her she had to do all this stuff. And at the time, I would tell her this. I would go, well, the problem you have here is you're both right and wrong. You're wrong in the sense that guy's right. What he's basically telling you is if you do these things, you'll easily sort of like fit into what we want of you, and then we'll like you and maybe we'll use you more. But on the other hand, if it doesn't work for you, maybe for you it's worth whatever the initial cost is to not do that. If you eventually break through, in her case she did, and she actually went completely the other way. She could have like literally punk haircuts and shaved down sides, and she would wear like very masculine presenting clothing, so it was kind of her vibe. So if you do this, if you make this choice that you don't want to go the traditional route, it's going to be harder, right? So this is one area where it feels like you've been a bit brave by trying to push back a bit.
I don't even know if it's brave, and isn't this a fun conversation? Because men don't have to have this conversation.
Sure.
Machine can wear whatever he wants, and everyone's like, he's so cool. But like, if we change up a little bit, I think. For me, I
still think he should wear a suit sometimes. He does look like he rolls on, like he's wearing a sleeper bag sometimes. Whatever. Listen, we've got different fashion senses. It's all good.
Different fashion sense.
I'm not on the catwalk.
So I don't actually talk about this often, but I'm about to do my pimp moment. So when I was in high school, like I said, I was a bit of a nerd, but I was also extremely, I would say, obese. I think at like 14, I weighed 96 kilos.
Oh, wow.
I was unhealthily sick. And since now that I've got older, I've actually being that overweight so young caused so many health issues that I'm dealing with now. But so that was me. And then as I grew older, I lost the weight. But I've always been a little bit uncomfortable in my skin in that sense, which I think anyone who struggled with their weight kind of understands, is you always feel like not sure of yourself. But because through most of my teen years and my early 20s, I was so overweight, I didn't really have that experience of wearing the dresses and the heels. And I was constantly trying to cover up. So when I got into this job and they're like, well, this is the outfit that you need to wear the heels and the dress. I tried that for a long time. I did do it. One, I have terrible fashion sense. I looked ridiculous. But two, I think that when you're uncomfortable in what you're wearing, it shows, and it's so blatantly obvious. So the way I carried myself on camera was so, I just looked, now when I watch back, I was like, you were so uncomfortable. And funny enough, ReDeYe pointed it out to me at one point. He was like, take the heels off. If they're going to make you that uncomfortable, take them off. And I was like, oh, can't do that. Girls got to wear heels. But I was so programmed into what I had seen. But I think what it actually needs to be is, are you comfy? So Shox loves to dress up, and she does such a great job of it. And she's comfortable in that persona and dressing up like that. For me, I'm not. I would much rather be in sneakers. And I think what happened was, as I'd been doing all these other games, I realized I really wanted to do CS. But I also realized that I was always going to be a budget version of everyone else. So I was always going to be a budget version of Freya and Shox with their beautiful outfits if I carried on trying to do that. I was always going to be a budget version of them in heels I think Zoe does punk really cool.
Yeah.
A cool way. And I was like, but if you keep trying to be like everyone you've seen, and not only in dress, but I think because dress relates to how you carry yourself, but in how you do your job as a desk host, you're just a budget version of them. Or you can just lean into who you are and be like, you know what, like I'm more comfortable in sneakers. I'm going to wear sneakers. Also, I think that you can still be sexy and be feminine without having to wear the cocktail dress. Like I'm going to lean more into who I am. And I think it's scary because you go, I'm going to be whoever the hell I am. I'm going to host the way I want to host. And you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. And now it's a lot uglier because it is very much, if they don't like it, there's nothing you can do because you've now shown who you really are. But I just wanted to do that because it was easier in the sense, not so much braver, it's easier because being myself was a lot easier than constantly trying to be this thing that I thought people wanted. Because mentally, it messed me up. Like nothing was good enough. Every day I looked in the mirror, I hated the way I looked, I hated the way I walked, I hated the way I talked. Nothing, it felt like nothing was good enough and I wasn't good enough. And I think that's the problem with this business that no one talks about, is that you can get so into your head and like just completely go off the rails. And I felt like that was the route I was going and I just didn't want to be that person. So I was like, this is who I'm going to be. And also, if it doesn't work out, like I'm from South Africa, so I never moved overseas. When everyone told me that if I wanted to make this a career, I needed to move, I'm such a pessimist that I was like, no, I'm not going to move my whole life because if this doesn't work, I'm not going to be on the other side of the world. And I was always like, I'm not going to move because like I don't get enough work, and I'm not going to move because maybe this isn't going to happen. And then it became a full-time job, and I was like, well, I didn't actually have to move. But I think because of that, I'm always like, oh well, I'll just be myself, and if people don't like it, like I'll find a job in South Africa and no one will, it doesn't matter, you know? So I think that was, for me, it was more that of like, I'll just be myself, and if this doesn't work out, whatever, I'll find a job, it'll be fine.
By the way, one thing I just wanted to reference just before I forget is earlier on when you said about how you do all these like partnerships with companies, stuff. You still do it to this day. Like if anyone follows your social media, you're always talking about like some new whatever event you're going to or thing you partner with or gadget they've sent you. One thing you do, we'll get to some of this later, but I want to address it now before I forget, which is you do this thing again where you're really self-deprecating, where you're like, sorry guys, I sort of have to mention a sponsor that's like giving me something. And what I wanted to say is like, yeah, but anyone who's watching that has chosen to follow your social media. They want you to succeed. Like they want you to have sponsors. They want you to do it. By the way, they're going to click whatever thing you ask them to click. I actually think you've misread your audience a little bit there. Or you're just being a little bit coy. Like, and people want you to have all these successful things going on in your career. They don't want it only to be a vlog of what you think, you know?
I know you say that, but it annoys me. So like, I know it's terrible, but I'm always just like, I don't really want to see you promote. Like, you were doing your AMA the other day. I was like, I want to read the Thorin AMA, but I don't care about whatever this thing is. And I'll click it now because I feel bad but sometimes I watch a lot of stuff, and I know Sharks has done it as well, where I've seen her be like, okay, no more promoted posts. Because I do think that sometimes we also feel bad where we're like, oh, like you come here. I think that Freya told me this once and it stuck with me forever. She was like, people follow us because we connect them to the players they love, right? That's the thing that we give them, that we are one step closer to the players that they love, and that's why they follow us. And I'm always like cognizant of that. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, I know you're here because you want Counter-Strike, and I know that you're here because you want something else, but I'm going to do this now because I kind of do have to pay the bills and I don't get hired for every event. So I'm sorry. But I suppose you are right. Like I should probably stop apologizing for that.
And I don't think you don't just read the copy. You also have like a value add. You add your personality and you bring you try to have fun with the things you do. And by the way, a bit like the Shocks one. By the way, I'll even give her props. I think she did some of the best branded content I've ever seen. You know, the one where she gets like the motherboard stuff and pretends she's cooking at home as if she's like Martha Stewart. That's actually really funny. That has its own value just in watching it. It's entertaining, isn't it?
Have you seen the one she does? This was my favorite. She did this for the Samsung phone launch so the thing about the phone, and I'm presuming if I know brand deals, is they tell you what they'll be like, these are the features that we love. Choose one.
Right. And
she chose the one where Samsung allowed you to remove images in the background.
Okay.
And she did this video, I think it was on TikTok, where she was like, ever got annoyed that your boyfriend keeps ruining your perfect shot? And then she had a picture and there was a dude in the background and she was like, with this phone, you can just take him out.
Okay, that's a good angle.
And it was like the best, but I just couldn't stop laughing. I was like, this is bloody brilliant. Like, what a funny way to do it. Like, she's really good with just...
Yeah.
Also, I think it's just... But that is, if you meet Shocks, that's her personality. That was the thing that, like, I loved is when I met her. I was like, exactly what you see. She slays it. She's, like, this complete babe, and she's super sexy, and she owns her sexuality. And then she's also, like, a mega troll who's sitting in her pajamas gaming all day. Like that is who she is, and I love that she's accepted. She's accepted all sides of herself, and she shows that. And she's not. I don't think she's ashamed to be like, well, this is all the different different facets of my personality. I'm not just one thing. I think that's something that's really important to kind of own up to at the end of the day.
To go back to when you said you were initially doing stuff like Overwatch, and then obviously later on came, the other big games that were the games of the time, PUBG, Apex Legends, etc. One thing I want to get to here is this. It's another thing that's because one thing I like to do when I do interviews with talent is I know that actually a lot of other talent in the industry will watch it and sometimes think like, was my experience similar? Can I pick up any tips here? Maybe how do I do the thing that person did? So I always like to be quite forthright with essentially sort of giving advice while we talk about it. So one thing I would get to is this. Is even working in esports, which itself is quite a brave decision to take in people's careers. Like it's risky, it's never a sure thing. Literally, there isn't a sure thing in esports. If people don't know, pick what you think is the most stable institution, maybe a game developer. Even those people get laid off every year or so. Like there's no such thing as there isn't in general the word anyway, but like people have this vision of a job as you go there for 40 years, at the end you get the gold watch and the big piece of cake and then you leave. That doesn't really exist, and it definitely doesn't in esports. But that's to say that even though to do that in itself is kind of quite brave, it's quite pioneering, etc. Within the industry, like I said with the Expos, there are so many things though that seem almost like a fucking life raft that you can cling on to, but in doing so means you won't get to your destination. So another one is, as you're saying here, when you first break in, almost everyone in esports has to start doing initial jobs that aren't actually their dream job. It's not really the main thing they're passionate about. It's why you'll probably have experienced this many times yourself. You know that classic cope that everyone who works the non-sexy jobs in esports, like the people who really do just send emails and do PowerPoint presentations and book flights, they all tell themselves that lie. They all go, it's bloody brilliant getting paid to play video games. And I want to go, you're not really paid to do that though, are you? You're really more sending the emails guy. Like, yeah, you're getting arranging the flight for the guy who does play the games and get paid for that. But that's not really your job, is it? What they're doing there is they just work an office job within esports. Listen, it's cooler than working an office job at, chemical engineering or something you don't give a fuck about. But in itself, it can be sort of like a safe gig, but also it's not really the job they want to do. So one thing I want to ask is this. When you have all these games come along, like you were getting the inroads to Overwatch there. I can tell you, there's a lot of people would say like, fucking hell, this is Blizzard, mate. This is like the game dev doing this. At the time, even Overwatch was billed as it's going to be the biggest league ever. It's going to be at the main esport, and you're seeing all things like you were working on the European one. But if you make your way through that part of the industry, I can tell you can get over to LA. You can suddenly be in a position like Zoe. You can be one of these bigger people in esport. You could be winning awards, right? You might say, yeah, but it's not my game. I'm passionate about CS. Yeah, but the temptation has to be there, whether it's Overwatch, whether it's PUBG, which is a giant game if people don't know, a lot of money behind it, whether it's even things like Apex, which are a bit flavour of the month, but there was a time these games were all popping. Isn't there a temptation to just stick to those things and not try to keep getting your way over to CS? Because even when you come back to CS, as we'll get to later, you don't get to jump straight from where you are in Overwatch to CS. You have to start at the bottom again, don't you? So it's kind of a bit of a risk.
I thought for Overwatch, I'll be honest. So in the beginning, like I said, I made my show reel for them on Counter-Strike. Then I got the gig. So we were going to be in Ukraine. I think that they how did that work? We went there for like 6 weeks. Then we came home for a week. Then we'd go back for 2 weeks. It was like 3 seasons over the space of a year. And when we got there, we obviously had a meeting with all the Blizzard staff. And the Overwatch League, the OWL carrot was dangled. And this was at the time, people need to understand, when OWL was massive. Like it was the Monty era. Yeah. Everyone was talking about OWL. It was going to be like Overwatch League, and all of us on there, like we did drink the Kool-Aid. Like there was a part where we were like, oh, this could lead to that. So I'm not even going to lie. At the time, I was like, shit, like actually maybe this is something I could do. And for me, there were Counter-Strike talents at OWL. So I was like,
Semler and people like that, right? I say,
yeah,
right.
For me, I was like, I still get to work with Semler and Monty's there. Right. So like, I'll be fine. Like that's actually what I want. These are the people I was watching. Like, I'll be good. Like that's OWL will be great. And I did believe it for, I think it was like 1 season. And then I actually don't care if I talk shit about Blizzard because fuck them. But like, I just had the worst experience with Blizzard.
Oh, wow, right.
It was terrible. So the first, I mean, let me be clear. The people that I worked directly with from Blizzard, none of whom work for Blizzard anymore, were amazing.
Right.
But these like the higher ups that everyone calls higher ups, but you don't actually know who they are. But like all communication comes from them. It was just the most like all over the place. Like, it was set up. I remember there was an Overwatch Contenders in the States, and then there was the European one. I was the desk host for the European one. They hired a lady with no esports experience for the American one. It didn't go well with her in the beginning. And how they had said is that, like, it was going to be, she would do the LAN finals where they brought the American and European teams together at the end of the season. She would desk host the first one. I would desk host the second one. And then the final one, like, they would choose the best host. Then suddenly they were like, okay, it turns out the score's actually really bad, so you need to do the LAN. So I was like, that's cool. I got to do the LAN. I was like, this is amazing. And then there was all this talk about, like, there's so much more opportunity. You'll have more LAN finals as, like, the seasons go on. And then as, like, the second season started, that, like, all changed. So they had kind of spoken about how there was this path to get to Al. And then it became very clear to me that that path was not available to me. So by the second season, basically Mika Burton came in. So if you don't know who she is, her dad was in Star Trek.
Geordie LaForge, yeah.
Yeah, and she had done, like, I think some dungeons.
By the way, that part itself must be wild for you then, since you've got that weird thing with your dad with Star Trek.
I was like, yeah. Well, I mean, when they were like, I got to see her, I was like, oh my gosh, I never got to meet her, but I was like, your dad is so cool. But she then, like, got the desk hosting job, and it was pretty much made very clear to me. So this was my thing, is their whole thing was always like, if you work hard and you prove yourself, as everyone tells you, there is an opportunity. And they kept telling me that. And then all of a sudden in season 2, they're like, okay, so here's Mika. Mika's going to do all the finals. Mika's going to Overwatch League next year.
Right.
That was it. Like, there was no, like, the higher ups have spoken in America. Like, that is it. We've hired, this is a girl that's never done desk hosting.
No, she wasn't from esports at all, yeah.
Yeah, you've done this whole season. We actually don't know what she's going to be like on camera, but yeah, she's got the next 2 LAN finals, and also she's going to Overwatch League next year. Good luck, have fun. And I was like, wow, that was my first lesson, that, like, when people say, if you just work hard, bullshit. That decision was made already. And, like, for me, Blizzard, it became very clear as time went on. So, like, I remember getting called in, because sometimes I say things like, I'll be like, oh, that team was trash. And I've realized now I should change my language. But I speak honestly. Like, we all got told, guys, listen, can we not say that the team played badly? What you need to do is focus on the team that won and what they did well. And we're sitting there being like, okay, so this team completely rolled the opposition. There is nothing to speak about. They are paid. They are an Overwatch League team's, like, academy team playing a bunch of friends in Poland. Like, they just destroyed them. Now we've got to do, like, a 20-minute desk segment where we're not allowed to talk about the other team being bad or being inexperienced or any of that. Like, that was kind of Blizzard's.
They were quite hands-on with, like, the culture and the vibe and stuff. They wanted it to be a certain way.
Yeah, and then they would always be like, oh, you know, we're super inclusive and we're all about, like, everyone being but, like, I was like, but, like, you have a very, like, you're constantly, like, girls that are your desk hosts must also be cosplayers, and, like, it's just, like, a
they
weird,
kind of have their own stereotype. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and, like, I loved, Starladder was producing it. I loved the production team. They were great to work with. I loved the staff, the 2 people that we worked with on the ground who used to come to studio from Blizzard were great. But every time they fed back from, like, whatever someone higher up said, it was kind of just like, what am I doing here? Like, this isn't esports. Like, what the hell is this? And it did suck. It sucked that that whole thing, like you said, like, they did dangle the Overwatch League carrot. So you do think, okay, well, maybe this is my break. You know, it's not Counter-Strike, but it's still a game and it'll be fun. But very quickly I was like, nope, that's not it. And it did make me a little bit, like, apprehensive of anyone else who sold that dream. I started to realize publisher owned of, like, esports is such a different space to what we have in CS. So obviously CS is tough. You have TOs, some TOs like you, some don't. They all have their own style of stuff. But at least there's, like, different places you can go. And maybe you don't go to any of them. But for the most part, like, it is a space where you can be yourself. Whereas if it is publisher owned, if the publisher doesn't like you, that is it. And that for me was kind of what happened with Overwatch, is Blizzard decided Mika Burton was their girl. And it didn't matter that I had done that first season. They had made that decision and that was it. I don't even think those decision makers had even seen me. I don't think they'd even watched Contenders Europe. It just wasn't on their radar. And if you speak to a lot of other Overwatch talent back then, they all kind of will say that I think they felt the same way, which was like, the publisher decides what they want this to look like, and it doesn't matter what you've given to their game, they're not going to choose you. So that was pretty tough. That was, like, the only time that I kind of had the stars in my eyes, like, maybe this is my chance. But Blizzard did a really good job of bringing the real world crashing down.
I like the way also, if anyone looks at the games you've worked in, they are primarily basically all FPS games. It's like Overwatch, PUBG, Apex Legends, Rainbow Six. Are you someone where, did they typecast you as an FPS person? Did you choose this? Was there not ever times where, like League or someone's offering, there weren't more like MOBA type games?
I got no Valorant's FPS. I just never wanted to go into Valorant. I did get asked to do a lot of Valorant. I did a lot of I've done fighting games in South Africa, but that's just because in South Africa I'll kind of jump onto anything because I know it's a small community, so I know the players in pretty much all the different communities. And I did kind of almost get pushed into FIFA for a while.
Right.
But I think for me, I just always I gravitated towards FPS because it's, if you know Counter-Strike, and I feel like if you follow Counter-Strike and you watch a lot of Counter-Strike, it's pretty easy when you watch the other games. That was always my experience. Like Overwatch was really easy to get into because of CS and because I kind of understood the dynamics there. And then obviously like it changes and the game is different, but the fundamentals are there. And PUBG was, I wouldn't say it was similar, but it kind of, I think if you're in FPS, when you move to other FPS games, you pick them up a lot faster. So it wasn't like I got typecast by anyone else. I think I would just say yes to those games because I knew it's easier to research them really quickly. So I'm like a big believer in it's really important that you come in research. You can't necessarily play every single game. When you're jumping from game to game to game, you can't play every game to the level you need to, but you can research it and you can watch and you can learn who the players are and what the sort of meta is at the time. It was easier for me to go from FPS game to FPS game than to go from like Counter-Strike to like a Dota. I think that would have been really mad. I did shoutcast Clash Royale once though, which was probably like the most.
Okay.
Clash Royale and e-golf. I did an e-golf tournament. I also shoutcasted an e-golf tournament once.
Was that just bizarre?
Made in Denmark. This is like, okay, so the best is, so there's all these golf games on PlayStation, right? But they did this e-golf event at Made in Denmark. It wasn't even a PlayStation game. It was like this old school PC game that you set up. And then how you play is, it's not like PlayStation where you're on the controller and you're like swinging. You put in like numbers to determine the angle. It's a very like complex mathematical game. And the people that made the finals were some of the most interesting players I've ever met. So the one guy was like a 40-year-old poker coach from the States who can't travel anywhere without his mom. So he came to Made in Denmark. It's like this massive golf tournament. They set up this tent in the middle of the golf course during like this big golf tournament. It's pissing down with rain and we're all in the tent with these like two PCs that they've got to keep dry no matter what. I'm with like some famous golfing YouTuber whose name I don't even remember now, who like makes golfing YouTube content, who is so confused as to why he's here, but just taking the paycheck. And so we meet this guy who's like this poker player. Then there's this other dude who won it in the end. He was a British dude who now lived in Thailand and had been banned from, I think it was gambling in the UK or betting. Because I don't know what he was doing, but super, super wealthy. Because they all like, because it's all maths. It was all like mathematics and like fast numbers. And I just thought these people were so fascinating. And I could not understand why that never took off just for the characters alone. Like I think those guys should have all like had their own TV show because what a weird world.
Sure. And
then their fun downtime was to play this like weird old school golf game that no one plays anymore. And they came to this tournament where they pretty much all of them like upgraded their flights with their own money because they were all mega wealthy. There was also like a lawyer from Greece who had to leave early because he had to go to like a case. So it's just wealthy dudes who randomly play this game online. That was the weirdest shit, but I did learn about golf. So I suppose there's that.
I don't forget the people that support me. And in the case of this video, that would be Matt Pugnaccio Rakula, Jason, Jensen Gore, Nikki, Tosh, Toucan, and you know who I'm always going to give the biggest shout out to, my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to find out who the next guest is on one of my interviews that I've already recorded but not yet released. Or maybe you want to take part in one of those fabled long-form discussions where you get to decide the topics. Well, if any of those perks or others tickle your fancy, simply click on the Patreon link in the description box below and put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today.